So welcome everybody, and thank you all for coming. I'm going to get started because it is 4:30. People can filter in if they want to join us. Just before we get started, there is a sign-in sheet that's going around. So if everyone on your table has already signed it, please pass it on to the table next to you. So our workshop is Countdown to 2024, Community Outreach for Get Out the Vote Success. And I'm Laurel Premier. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Piedmont. And Jennifer Trainer, who's running the slides for us, is our voter service director. And she helped organize this workshop for today. So the goal today is to hear from community organizing leaders about their outreach and their Get Out the Vote successes. And we hope that in doing that, we can provide you some tips to take back to your leagues and successfully partner in your own communities leading up to the 2024 election. So next slide, yeah, the agenda. So we have 3 panelists, and I'm going to introduce them in more detail when they get ready to speak about their organization, but just really briefly. From San Francisco Rising, we have Emily Lee. And from CALPRIG Students is Paige Lieblich. And from the Council on American Islamic Relations is Zahra Billoo. So thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate it. So we're going to start by hearing from the panelists, and then after we hear from them, I'll go into a little bit about the importance of community organizing and some success stories from leagues that are in Alameda County. And hopefully that will be a little inspiring for you. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to get started on your own. And then at the end, we have a lot of time that we save for questions. So I'm really hoping this will be more interactive. So you'll hear from us, get to know a little bit about what we do, and then we'll have a give and take from everyone here. So let's get started then with, next slide, Emily Lee, who is the co-director of San Francisco Rising, which is a multiracial alliance of community organizations building the political power of low-income communities of color in San Francisco. Emily is a recognized leader in electoral organizing with particular expertise in multiracial alliance building, community labor partnerships, volunteer engagement, multilingual field operations, and ethnic media. Emily previously spent 10 years doing youth organizing and ultimately served as the political director at the Chinese Progressive Association, which was a founding member of SF Rising. Emily was a co-founder of Bay Resistance and Seed the Vote. So, Emily, all yours.
Thank you.
Point of order. Will this PowerPoint be on the convention website?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be at my first ever league conference. Again, my name is Emily. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a co-director at San Francisco Rising. And as Laurel said, we are a multiracial electoral alliance. We formed about 12 years ago in San Francisco because many of the organizations who are part of SF Rising, they do grassroots organizing, they do advocacy work, they do service work, and they do policy work. And so many of the groups had been working for many years in the community, developing the leadership of those most directly impacted to work on issues like workers' rights, immigrant rights issues, education, housing, and tenant rights. And they were, along the way, working with local legislators, passing policies. But what they realized was that, that process of winning, for example, a minimum wage increase for workers wasn't actually as impactful as they thought it would be because it wasn't getting implemented in the way that it should have been, right? So implementation was a very important part of the policy work that wasn't happening always. So the campaign, the winning, the writing the policy, and getting it passed was happening. But we really needed to form a more specific political organization that was focused on elections, and particularly looking at C3. On the C3 side, we work on ballot measures, and we take positions on ballot measures. And we also have a C4 organization called San Francisco Rising Action Fund, which is allowed to make endorsements for candidates. And so SF Rising formed with this kind of experience of, we believe that the people most directly impacted should be at the table making decisions in the city. But we also need to make sure that we're talking to voters every election cycle so that they're educated about what the issues are, what the policies are, and how we can actually make sure that implementation is happening correctly. So I'll say a little bit more about the organizations who are part of SF Rising. There's 8 organizations that do work in the Black, Latinx, Chinese, Filipino community. So those are the Filipino Community Center, Causa Justa Just Cause, Poder, Chinese Progressive Association, SOMCAN, La Colectiva, which is part of the Dolores Street Community Services, Coleman Advocates for Children and Youth, and MUA, which stands for Mujeres Unidas y Activas. So these organizations formed an electoral alliance, SF Rising, because we wanted to also reach voters that were typically ignored by mainstream campaigns. So most of the time when elections are happening, actually this room is who most campaigns want to talk to, right? Older, predominantly white, predominantly middle, upper class, seniors, people who are very likely to vote, right? And so that makes some logic, and yet the reality is our communities, we knew were being ignored by campaigns, by elected officials, by candidates running for office, and that has a cost, because it means that the opinions, the experiences of marginalized communities are not taken into account during elections. And so we set about to actually bring these communities to the table and to be a force in the electoral process. And that means that we wanted our voters to be the margin of victory. We wanted our voters to be the 10,000 votes to pass that rent control measure, or the 10,000 votes needed to pass an increase for the minimum wage. So we wanted to be the margin of victory so that people would have to talk to us, and they would have to consult us, and they would have to actually look at how our communities would be impacted. So in that sense, we've done I would say a decent job. Since we formed, we participate in every election, pretty much, in San Francisco. And the way we do that is through integrated voter engagement. So we train up our members of these different, all the various organizations that are part of us. They themselves are getting educated on the issues. If we took a position on a ballot measure, we might be talking to voters specifically about that ballot measure. So we have run voter engagement programs in Spanish, Tagalog, English, Chinese, and those have proved to be very successful. One, because otherwise those voters typically, with the exception I think of the Chinese community, those voters are typically not targeted or spoken to. And so they actually do become kind of like really valuable votes because people don't count on them to vote, and when they do, they can actually make a difference, right? Especially in San Francisco, where you can see a lot of issues and races are decided by slim margins, So we've been able to train our leaders and members to do that work themselves, to talk to voters, and with pretty successful results. So when we've looked at our data, we've been able to show that voters who we spoke with in certain precincts or districts vote at rates of up to 19% higher than people we don't talk to. So we have some hard data that shows that yes, talking to people, engaging them, speaking to them in a language they are comfortable in, and with messengers who are credible, that look like them and come from their community, is impactful, and it does increase voter turnout. We also want to make sure that we're not just doing this, just in elections. The whole goal is that we want to connect this to our broader year-round organizing work, and so the idea is that these voters are integrated back into organizations, they get plugged into the member groups that formed SF Rising, that they are then involved in the organization or involved in other issues, or they're connected to the services that the organization might provide, and that these voters are talked to again and again and again, so that year after year, cycle after cycle, we're building a reputation with them, we have a relationship with them, and we're seen as a credible messenger. So that's a little bit about the kind of the electoral work that we do. Some of the ballot measures we have worked on, let's see, I have the list somewhere. We have worked on issues such as increasing, actually lowering the voting age. We worked on Vote 16 back in 2020, which narrowly lost, I think went less than 2 points. We have worked on ballot measures to increase affordable housing, to impose an eviction moratorium. We've worked on a lot of ballot measures that have lost. We've worked on a lot that have won, right? And each cycle we are trying to build our expertise and build our ability to, fight harder and win smarter the next time. The other thing I'll say is that in addition to our electoral work, we've also done a lot of work around just general civic engagement. So things like redistricting, which I will talk about a little bit more in detail, participating in the census, so making sure that all these unlikely voters or low frequency voters who are also hard to count during the census, that we're also using our outreach skills to make sure they're counted in that process. We work on voter registration with young people, teens who are 16 and 17 years old. We do a lot of college student organizing as well on the 3 campuses in San Francisco. So we're engaging young people in the process. And we've also participated in the budgeting process in San Francisco, which is kind of happening right now. So looking at local budgets and how they're being spent and making sure that, what's getting cut, right? Budget is a moral document. How do we know which communities are getting served and which ones are on the chopping block each year for the budget? So, and this all happens kind of in concert with doing political education and leadership development of our leaders. In terms of the redistricting, I'll just say something, give kind of a short case study of how we worked with the League of Women Voters on redistricting. So last year, after the census, the redistricting in San Francisco, for folks who are familiar, it happened and was created using a appointed task force. So appointed by the mayor, the board of supervisors, and the elections commission. We started talking to the League of Women Voters, I think, well before that task force had been established. The League was monitoring, all the different processes, the elections commission, and we were kind of in conversation about it. We are very clearly an advocacy organization that has a very clear, subset of people who we're trying to organize for and advocate for. And so we had, we wanted to make sure that the voices of our communities were represented on that task force. And that it was a diverse pool, that it was people who had a variety of experiences. And so we advocated for certain people to be on the task force, and throughout the entire process of redistricting, we were coordinating a citywide coalition that was trying to actually create a unity map that would say, how do we most equitably redraw district lines in the city while prioritizing communities that traditionally have been excluded from the process or who actually, require more resources, and that, so that they're not divided. And that process became very politically contentious for anyone who was following it in San Francisco, and we were able to partner with the League in different ways. I think we played a very clear advocacy role, and we were working with other community organizations to advocate for a very specific map. And then in that parallel process, the League was really advocating for a fair process, an equitable process, a transparent process, public participation, so that people could really get involved in the process, right? Regardless of what map they supported or not. And so that was actually very helpful to have the League, along with Asian Law Caucus, Common Cause, to kind of give that nonpartisan viewpoint of like, it doesn't matter, everybody should have the ability to participate. There should be no decisions made at 4 in the morning when people have not been able to actually weigh in, or that, the process itself in San Francisco was so political, actually, and it became so partisan that it was, in some of the headlines were just ridiculous. Like chaos ensues, task force members resign at 2 in the morning, walk out of the meeting, right? So maybe it's only in San Francisco, but it was a very bad process, and I think the league really was able to point that out. It doesn't, whatever your opinions were about the district lines, the process itself was unfair. It was untransparent, and the public lost trust in it. And I think that was a very valuable voice to have while we were, doing our advocacy right alongside that. We've also worked with the league in other ways where, for example, district attorney elections. There was a big push back in 2019 when the district attorney was, for the first time in 100 years, was being contested in San Francisco. During that process, I believe the league held a voter education forum, and then again in 2020, yeah, 2022. Thank you. 2022. Sorry, so many elections last year. 2022. Again, the league held a district attorney forum, and we were able to send. We were able to tell people about it so they could attend that forum to make their own, kind of decision. And so we've been able to kind of partner with the league in its different programs, and give information with each other, notify each other about events that are happening, and we would love to actually see, whenever. We welcome members of the league also to get involved in our work. We do a lot of voter education. We do take positions on ballot measures. We educate people about them, and encourage people to either support or oppose. And we welcome any members to volunteer on their own time, not as a league member, but as an individual, to come door knock with us, come volunteer with us, come phone bank with us, because as we know. That's a very important part. It's not just that people have the information, but that they feel empowered and they understand, and they have someone at their side who can really support them in voting, which we have seen made a huge difference to the communities we're working with. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much, Laura.
We're going to have questions at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Remember it.
So thank you so much, Emily. Next we're going to hear from Paige Lieblich, who's a third-year student at UC Berkeley. She's studying environmental science. She's the chapter chair for CALPIRG Students at UC Berkeley, as well as the secretary on the state executive committee. She got her start with CALPIRG in January of 2022 on the local Beyond Plastics campaign, which was to ban plastics in the city of Berkeley. And after becoming the campaign coordinator for this project in the fall, she managed the team that passed the local ordinance. Paige spent the summer canvassing in the Bay Area to build support for the Save the Bees campaign, and she now works to increase marine protected areas along California's coast.
Thank you. So I'm Paige, third year at UC Berkeley.
Go Bears.
Go Bears. I was the chapter chair this past year, and I'll be treasurer for the upcoming year. But I'll be around on the state board as treasurer again as well. Next slide, please. And next slide. Little introduction about CALPRIG students. We got started about 50 years ago, basically by college students that just wanted to make a difference in the world around them. So we work on a lot of social and environmental issues like climate change, plastic pollution, textbook affordability, poverty, homelessness, and the most important one is voter registration. And so you can do the next slide, please. So our New Voters Project is just the name of our campaign that does voter education and registration nationwide, actually, but I'm just going to talk about the California branch today. So it got started in 1984, and since then we've registered 2 million young people and have had 3 million get out the vote contacts, which is just when you have one conversation or something with somebody and give them the information they need to register to vote or learn how and when to vote. So super effective in what we've done. We've gotten 82% of our registrants actually vote, and 75% of the people who we contact actually vote. So we've gotten a lot of practice, we know what we're doing. And this last third bullet point is my favorite. More than 2/3 of the people we register are new. Because young people, ages 18 to about 29, generally just super underrepresented in politics. And we're the country's largest and most diverse generation, and so we should definitely have an accurate representation of what we want to do in politics. Which is why it's really important we register all these new young people. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a big part of our voter registration work is collaboration, because everybody is impacted by voting, everybody should be voting, and so everybody should have a seat at the table when we have these conversations. The best way that we've done this is from making campus coalitions, so most of the work that we do is literally on college campuses. They're definitely applicable outside of that as well. So generally CALPRIG, each of our chapters will run or work with student government to run a voting coalition, which is filled with like clubs and other activist groups and cultural groups on campus. We just want to reach every corner of the student body so that everybody can learn all they need to about voter registration. These are super important because just like, again, we are all limited by time and people and volunteers and all that, so if you have all these different groups working with you and just on the same page and sharing ideas, then everybody can just send out this information to more people. So super effective and an easy way to do that. But aside from just working with like student clubs and just general students, working with VIPs has been super helpful. So on our college campuses, this has been like student governments, deans, chancellors, a couple of different reasons. One, I have a good example. We've been working with the External Affairs Vice President, which is one part of student government at UC Berkeley. And he kind of has been helping us out a lot. We kind of just made buddies with him. It was helping us kind of jump some hurdles that maybe had some loopholes before that now we don't need to deal with because he likes us and can help us. So making friends with people that are kind of in charge has been super helpful because they generally will just appreciate the work that you're doing and want to help you out. And the last thing is just talk with everyone multiple times. Everybody's busy, everybody's a lot going on, so keep inviting multiple people and multiple groups to your coalitions if you want to build them. Just to make sure that people get the information more than once, they don't get lost in the fray. Next slide, please. So kind of some of the work that we do, like to actually get this work done on campuses. Tabling is a really big one to do our get out the vote work. And it's important to just like give people the information. A lot of young people are super new to voting. These people are 18 or they're fresh in college, they're in a new city. Voting has a lot of hurdles that young people haven't really learned how to jump yet. And so just giving them all the information they need is incredibly helpful. And doing it around important dates is good too. There's registration dates coming up, or you need to mail in your ballot by a certain day. That's really helpful so that people see you tabling, like, oh my gosh, I should do this right now, and then they actually do it. Phone banking is super helpful as well. This is a big one. If you're building these lists of people that like you've already registered to vote, you've already talked to before, or any lists you've already gotten, actually just calling them and telling them how and when to vote and getting their commitment to vote, is really helpful because then they keep hearing from you, they know it's coming, and you can actually get that done. In student government, I talked a little bit about this before, but the EAVP, which is just part of student governments on college campuses, generally already work on voting, so if you have people reaching out to them and working with them, you just aren't stepping on each other's toes, and kind of work with each other and build each other up and get more support from them. And another tip is to just listen to young people. People have a lot of questions, and they want to learn for the most part. They want to get voting done. But just make sure you listen and respond to all their concerns. And for us, it's been super helpful to start early. I kind of learned my lesson with that in the 2022 election. You want to start thinking about it way before when the election is actually coming up, because by that point, you're a little short on what you can actually do. So start thinking as early as possible. Next slide.
What's the EAVP?
It stands for External Affairs Vice President.
Okay.
It's a branch of student government that a lot of colleges
Okay.
have.
I just didn't know the acronym.
No worries. Awesome. And then yeah, when you're thinking about collaborating with people, it's kind of a little of stuff that I said before. But voter work should include as many people and as many groups as possible, because voting affects everybody. And so everybody should have a seat at the table in these conversations that you're having and the tools that you're using to actually register and educate young people and whoever else you're voting, or you're registering to vote. And again, start early in 2023, not 2024. That way you just get a foot in the door before things really get moving. And our tip for what we do is to stay nonpartisan. Our New Voters Project is totally nonpartisan, just to give people the resources and the education they need instead of influencing which way we want them to vote. So that's been our biggest tip in collaborating with different groups. But yeah, those are all my tips, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Paige. Next, we're going to hear from Zahra Billoo, who serves as the Executive Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations in the San Francisco Bay Area office, which is the oldest CAIR chapter office. And since joining in 2009, Zahra has led the organization through a period of six-fold growth. She's a licensed attorney in California, and she manages one of the largest CAIR offices in the country with a team of civil rights and social justice advocates dedicated to the empowerment of American Muslims through legal services, legislative advocacy, and community organizing.
Thank you so much. So good to hear from you, Paige and Jennifer, and sincerely honored to be spending the afternoon with all of you. I've been a longtime fan of the League of Women Voters, and we refer to the content, we partner with them on events, and honestly, sometimes when I just need to Google something and find neutral information, it's just an incredible resource. I'm so happy to be here. I wanted to start by asking you all a question. Do you remember the first election that you cared about? Where you were like, huh, which one?
1984.
I was 1 year old.
I was on the ballot to be a delegate for George McGovern of all people.
84?
And I went to a Christian college in Central Illinois, and I had people coming up to me. The professors were like, "I'll pray for you." I'm like, "Yeah, but I win?" That's what I thought they meant, though. So yeah, I remember that one.
That's amazing. Okay, I'll take two more. I'll just pick on you because you're all here because you cared about an election. So which one was it? Someone else in the back.
1973. I ran for student body president when I was in the senior in high school.
I love it. Oh my God, thank you. Okay.
Another George McGovern, 1972.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
68.
Okay, fine. I'll take one more because this is exciting. In the back.
It was 1968.
Yeah.
Tell me what it was. Uh-oh.
Well, it was Robert Kennedy and
Okay.
campus.
Okay. So mine, a little bit more recent. One more, yes.
I don't remember what the actual election was, but I come to California and I needed to change my voter registration because my dad wanted me to get one of the state grants, which I didn't get. But so I just remember voting in California. I've been here 50 years, so that's why it's important.
That's amazing. So I start with this question because I think one of the things that I learned very early on about voting, and at the time I was organizing young people, and it was that it's social. That if I'm voting and I tell my friends vote, and if I'm excited about it and I talk to them about the issues and they get organized about it. And so my first election that I cared about was the 2000 presidential election. I was just like a year short of being able to vote. I was 17, and it was Bush v. Gore, and it was a mess.
Yeah.
And then my second one was the Gray Davis recall, which led to Arnold Schwarzenegger signing my undergraduate and graduate diplomas, and I still have really mixed feelings about it. And then my third one, and I'll stop with my third one, was the 04 presidential election. And I remember driving home that night. Now keep in mind, I was a 17 and a freshman in college when 9/11 happened. And my fellow Muslim students, some of whom were foreign students, others of whom, like me, were visible Muslims, were targeted repeatedly in the months and years that followed. I watched and cried as we invaded Afghanistan and then Iraq, and then we passed the Patriot Act, and all of that happened. So the 2004 election, I was so excited to bring a polling place to my campus for the first time. I was in student government also, but can I admit, I never had the guts to run for elected office. I always sought out appointed cabinet positions because then I could be involved, but not have to put myself on the ballot. And so I was doing work on the student government cabinet, the president's cabinet. We brought the polling place to campus. And that 2004 election, like, there were students wrapped around the student union waiting in line to vote. And Puff Daddy was the VIP who was of influence that year, and so he had a Rock the Vote campaign, and so all of us were wearing t-shirts. And that night, when I drove home, because back then we used to get the results the same day, these days it drags out. I remember thinking, oh my God, I need to move to Canada. The problem was I was about a year short graduating, right? So I hadn't made it fully through college yet, and my family wasn't, like, it was just a whole, I couldn't move to Canada, so I decided to stay and fight and commit my work to this. How do we talk to people about voting? We get them excited, we get them interested, and what pulls people in is the fact that they are impacted. And what disengages people is when they don't make that connection, when they don't feel connected to the people doing the work, they don't feel connected to the people running for office, and they feel frustrated or disenchanted with what happens when those people are in office. So these days, I like to think that I have the dream job, if you knew me when I was 17 or 18, which is that I'm a full-time activist. So I'm the executive director at CAIR San Francisco Bay Area, and our mission is to promote justice, enhance the understanding of Islam, and empower American Muslims. Our primary constituency is American Muslims, but we believe that when you engage any community, everyone benefits. When one community is lifted up, all communities are lifted up. And the Muslim community, I think, is a really good example of this, because the first people, a really sad and good example of this, the first people attacked in post 9/11 hate crimes were not Muslims, they were Sikh Americans. And so when we lift up Muslim civil rights, we lift up Sikh civil rights. The crisis at the border right now, it's not just people from South and Central America coming across the border, it's Afghans and Turkish people and Iranian people who only have enough money to get to South and Central America, so they're also coming across the border. So when we solve the crisis at the border, inshallah, or God willing, then we solve it for a lot more people than just the people that we initially think about. And so, though our primary constituency is American Muslims, we partner with groups like League of Women Voters to really just ensure that we're doing our best work possible to lift everyone up. And the way we do our work is through a couple of different strategies. Direct legal services. Somebody made the lawyers are liars joke to me yesterday, and I hadn't heard it in a long time, but I'm a lawyer, so that's where my heart is. And I was annoyed, but it was funny. So we provide free legal services to anyone facing discrimination because they're Muslim or mistaken for Muslim. We also provide immigration legal services because we know that if we help people on the path to citizenship, more voters, right? Like we want to help people stay, we want to help people feel engaged and connected to the resources that are here, and that includes the opportunity to vote. We work with the media to tell our community stories so that the people who are representing Muslims on television are actually Muslim and can speak from that voice and that experience. We do a lot of community outreach and engagement, and so if you saw me on my phone earlier, it's because we're going to Sacramento on Monday. We're taking about 400 Muslims from across the state to Sacramento to meet with their legislators. And the way we get those people to show up is we're out in the community, and I'll talk about that from a voter engagement perspective. And then we do political advocacy. And so the combination of outreach and political advocacy is where I'll spend my last few minutes talking. It's really important to move people to vote. But beyond that, well, let's start there. It's really important to move people to vote, but how do we do it? How do we do it with communities that are under surveillance, that feel disconnected from everything? And in some cases, right, like they're working class, like where do you find them? How do you find them? Do they speak English? Do they not speak English? What do you do? And so we don't have a congregation of our own, right? We're not a religious organization or a civic organization, but we work through congregations. And I think this is one of the most powerful tools available to people who are doing mobilizing, is if I can go to a mosque and find 500 people in one afternoon, well, it's going to take me like 6 restaurants in downtown San Francisco to find that many people. And maybe not even that, knowing what's happening to downtown San Francisco, by the way. Maybe 10, maybe 20. But if I can go to a captive audience and work through the religious leadership, right? Our equivalent of, to quote you, right, our equivalent of VIPs is if I can get to the religious leader who's giving the sermon and get them to say a few words about civic engagement, and then I'm outside with my voter registration forms or my buttons or my stickers, that makes a huge difference. And so that's one of the primary ways that we're doing that mobilizing, is we're going to congregations. We also do all of the traditional things. Phone banking. I'm a big fan of robocalling, even though I know the success numbers are not that high, but they increase the visibility of the effort, right? Text banking. These days, everybody is on WhatsApp or text message or Telegram. I'm not a fan of Facebook Messenger, but you know what? People use that also, right? And so really going to people through the communication channels that they're using. And then the last thing I'll say about mobilizing before moving to this political advocacy piece is, so much has changed in how we reach people, right? There are many people who are returning to in-person gatherings like we are here today. But we also all know people who are not doing in-person gatherings still, right? And so in COVID, particularly actually around our census outreach, we had to pivot from in-person to digital very quickly. And that was exciting for the first year and a half. Right? Remember when everyone's cameras were on Zoom? And like we'd like mess around with the backgrounds and it'd be fun, and then you'd show everyone your cat or your dog or your kid. And now if you get onto a Zoom gathering, nobody turns on their camera, nobody's really there. You're just talking to yourself on the computer. And still there's a couple of people that need that. And by a couple I mean like there are people that need that, right? And so what we've had to balance is resuming in person, sometimes even at the risk of people who are doing the work, right? Our census outreach workers kept going out in person at times, right? Like they went out masked, they went out gloved, and they did that work. And we learned how to do it digitally. And now in 2023, and particularly as we get ready for 2024, we're going to have to do both. Working class people are not going to get on a Zoom with you at 12 p.m., period. On a weekday at 12 p.m., they're just not going to be there, right? They've got a job to do. But you might find them at an ethnic grocery store. You might find them at a religious congregation. People who are retired, people who maybe aren't going out in the same way, might be available on Zoom. So we've got to do both, right? And that's in addition to Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok and Google advertising, Facebook advertising, and Instagram. Did I say Instagram? So that's the mobilizing piece. The last thing I want to touch on, and I know I've spoken for a while, is political advocacy. If all we do is talk to people about civic engagement every 2 to 4 years, then we're losing people along the way. And our elected officials are taking a free ride, right? Like, and what's I think I can thread this needle in a very nonpartisan way. I'm going to try it. We are in a very progressive corner of the country, and I remember years ago I was speaking to a member of Congress, and it was a national gathering, and I was like, but we have all. This is me, Zahra, not legal women voters. And I said to this elected official, I said, but all I've got is Democrats. Right? Like, I know you're speaking to everyone that's got like different parties, and all I've got is Democrats, and they all say they're progressive. And this elected official said to me, but like, how progressive are they? Right? Like, you've got like right of middle, left of middle, however you want to thread that needle, right? What I mean is, our communities need to feel connected to their elected officials. And elected officials need to be held to account for their promises. Now, a really, I think, important way to do that in a nonpartisan way is to just keep people connected. So we all like had forums about this person and this person and this person. Now this person was elected. Cool. However you feel about them, they represent us. I said this to my staff today. I said, they're not calling us back. I said, remember that they work for us. So call them again. Go to their office if they don't pick up the phone, right? Just keep showing up. And we may take that for granted as activists and leaders and organizers, but the difference it makes for individuals is so key, right? Who do I talked to someone today and they said, I had a rental property issue at this city. And so I reached out to my member of the city council, right? The ability to do that is where I think we're going to see real growth and sustained engagement, particularly when the environment has become so difficult across the country. We sit in a place where I think we've got a really great crop of elected officials across the board, however they fall politically. They're engaged with their communities. They come, they show up. They do more than photo ops. They actually introduce great legislation, right? And they know that they will get voted out if they don't keep showing up. And so part of that work for us is to take Muslims to the state capitol, to take Muslims to the city council meetings, so that in 6 months when we're like, here's the voter education forum, it's not the first time they're hearing about that race. It's not the first time they're hearing about that person. And 6 months after the election, we're saying now keep going. And keep going, because you voted for them, right? Again, we didn't tell you how to vote. You voted for whomever you wanted to. Keep going. Whether or not, right? And I remind people of this all the time. Oh, you don't like the people that were elected? They still work for you, right? Like, if you go to work and you don't like your staff, they still work for you. You don't like your boss? You know what? You're still there. Same thing with our elected officials. Keep showing up. And so I am hopeful around what we've seen in the last few years, specifically around national mobilizations, but also local mobilizations. We are seeing more people understand the power they have and this next 18 months is going to be a huge window of opportunity for the work that all of you do.
Thank you so much, Zahra, and all of our panelists. Before we get to questions, I just wanted to talk a little bit about why collaboration is important to us in the League. And I want to share some successful collaboration stories with a couple of leagues that are in Alameda County, because those are the leagues I have the easiest access to. And I'm sure, you know, many of you are doing similar collaboration efforts in your leagues. So one thing that I noticed hearing from all of the panelists is it's about relationships, right? It's about building relationships. And these folks have relationships with people who are in their specific communities that we don't have relationships with. But what we can do as league members is build relationships with them. So, like, we don't have to go into their communities and try to pretend like we're a part of their community and, you know, develop a relationship with somebody that is going to be a hard path to develop. We can focus on the organizations themselves, and in a lot of cases, you know, the league has a huge reputation and a huge...
A good one, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the easy path for us. The other thing I wanted to say, is, you know, when we talk about making a relationship with an organization, organizations don't really exist. I mean, yes, they do, but organizations are the people who are in the organizations, and I don't want to get into Citizen United stuff, but find the people. You know, it's not like, oh, I'm wanting to develop a relationship with this organization. It's who's the person in that organization, and how can I develop a relationship with that person? And it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to start huge. And before I get to the examples, the one other thing that I wanted to talk about is that when we develop those relationships and we collaborate with other community organizations, not only are we lifting up the league, but we're also lifting up all of those organizations, and so we're lifting up all of the community members in our communities. And that's not, like, I like to focus on the empowering voters, defending democracy thing, but it's not just about empowering voters, defending democracy at that sort of ground level. Like, yes, obviously we want to reach as many voters as we can, but it's also about lifting our visibility in the community, lifting their visibility in the community, and so in doing that, we get more members. We get more members, we get more volunteers. At our president's lunch, where we met for lunch today, there was a lot of talk about help. We need more people, you know, who are actually volunteering and doing the work on the ground in our leagues. And this is the way to do it: being more visible in your community and collaborating with people who are doing work there. So the examples that I've been talking about. The first example that I wanted to mention is Eden area. So the League of Women Voters of Eden area. We have a representative here. Correct me if I get any of these details wrong. Participated this year in a new citizen celebration, and they did this in conjunction with. Oh, thank you for noticing. Next slide. So on the left, you can see a picture there of the Castro Valley Women's Club. So they collaborated with the Castro Valley Women's Club and the Castro Valley Adult and Career Education Center. The Adult and Career Education Center provides new citizen classes. And so the graduates of those classes actually become U.S. citizens. And so they held a celebration for the new citizens. The Women's Club hosted the event. The school provided all the publicity and invitations and refreshments, so it was a relatively light lift for Eden Area League. What they did is showed up at the event and provided a short history on voting. So that's something that is in their wheelhouse. It's something they know how to do. They didn't have to do any of the publicity for it other than within their own, voter newsletter channels or whatever that they're already doing, and they can contribute to this great event. The second example that I want to talk about is League of Women Voters of Oakland. And the Oakland League's very active and has done a lot of things, but I picked a couple of things to highlight. One is that they collaborated with the local county community food bank, and they included a one-page flyer in the food deliveries that it wasn't like a here's everything on your ballot kind of voter education thing. It was a here's the importance of voting, here's what you need to do to make sure your voter registration is updated, here are important dates, stuff like that. But they were able to print those flyers. That's a little bit of work, but not hugely laborious, and then give them to the volunteers at the Alameda County Food Bank. And I don't know if anyone from the league actually volunteered. I know Alameda, for those who are in Alameda County, the food bank is always looking for volunteers. Go help them pack food. And if it's during an election year, maybe you'll have a flyer put in there from the Oakland League. The other thing that the Oakland League did is they print their own Easy Voter Guide, and this is obviously a heavier lift, but they print their own Easy Voter Guide that has local election information, and they distributed that to all of the community organizations that they have a relationship with. So they focused on people who were in low voter turnout areas. They also distributed them with help from libraries, senior centers, and faith groups, among other things. And then, my league is Piedmont. We are a insanely small town that is surrounded by Oakland. We have an already civically engaged community. We have a bunch of organizations in my community already that are doing things like racial equity and climate activism. What we do as a league there, we don't need to help turn out the vote in our community. That's not an issue for us, but we partner with those organizations by occasionally co-hosting speaker events, by sharing information about events that we are having, by sharing information about our candidate forums. So I know the leaders of all of those organizations. If there's an issue that they think the league is going to be interested in, they pick up the phone and they call me or they send me an email. So it's people-to-people relationships. Okay, that's all I want to talk about that. And so now I just wanted to talk. Yes, you're already on it. Getting started. So start small, or if you're already doing stuff in your league, you can remember that building can also be small. We don't have to take giant steps. We often think oh, the league could be doing this, or the league could be doing that, and it's overwhelming, and we don't have the volunteer bandwidth to do it. So start small. Find one organization in your community that has a mission that's in line with the league's positions. Go online, subscribe to their newsletter, or have your communications person subscribe to your newsletter. You'll be getting invitations to all of their events. The first thing you can do in collaboration is put those events on your league's calendar, put them in your league's newsletter. It doesn't have to be a huge step. It doesn't have to be spending hours and hours on the ground with an organization going door to door with dozens of volunteers. We do what we can with the resources that we have. The one almost final thing, I don't want to say that too much, is do the things that we are good at. So when I gave the example of the Oakland League, they're printing voter information guides. That's what they do anyway. Offer that to other people. Hey, we have this guide, could you use that? Can we give you some, like, instead of what can you do for us, it's here's this thing we're doing anyway, you take it, you bring it into your community that you're already connected with. Same, like really simple for candidate forums and things that we do every year, reach out to other organizations. Hey, we're holding a candidate forum on such and such a date. Can you publicize it to your audiences? Give them the things that we excel at and that we're already doing. Think long term. Oops. Uh-oh. Did I lose? Nope, it's back. Okay. So, developing relationships is a long-term process. So start small and start today. I don't know if people have heard of the expression about planting trees, like the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time to plant a tree is today. So, it would have been great if we all have these long-term relationships with all of the organizations in our communities, and we're already perfectly engaged with them and collaborating with them. That's okay. So we don't have that beautiful live oak tree in our backyard. Plant a tree today, and 20 years from now, somebody will thank you. So next slide, yes. I think Paige was the one who mentioned this when she was talking. Like, seriously, the 2024 election will be here sooner than we'd like to think. So I know a lot of leagues take time off over the summer, but when you hit the ground running, or if you have volunteers that are still doing stuff over the summer, start now, start building relationships, and get yourself lined up to start doing the work prior to the ballots being mailed out on February 7th. So if you're trying to establish those relationships after the holidays, it's going to be tough. All right, that's all that I wanted to cover now. I am going to open things up to questions. Do you remember your question?
I do.
All right. So you can either speak loudly, or I can come around with the microphone. You have to hold this really close to your mouth, so I have to say it's not very COVID friendly. But
I'm usually loud enough.
Okay.
I'm Betsy Starbuck. I'm president of the San Bernardino Area League. We're not so progressive. So, but my first question is for Emily. I'm wondering, how you organize that. So when I've done GOTV, it's always been organized by precinct. So in a precinct, my neighborhood, there's black, there's Hispanic, there's Filipino, there's white. And so I can't send, or I haven't at least sent out somebody who's each of those ethnicities. I'm sending one person to cover the whole precinct. So I guess my question is, how do you get your data? And okay, that's my first question. I'll sit down.
So because we do so much electoral work, we actually use a political database called Political Data Inc. Yeah, PDI. Yeah, which is what a lot of labor unions use and other organizations that do this work. So if you have access to PDI, you can essentially find the list of all the voters by language, by country of birth, there's so many different ways you can separate the data. And
so that's how you with PDI you look and do those demographic cuts.
Yeah, and then we generate lists, so if we want to run a Spanish-speaking, anybody born in a Spanish-speaking country or requested a Spanish ballot, we filter that. Maybe we only want to talk to the Democrats, or maybe we want to talk to anyone who is recently registered. So you can put all these different filters, create your list, and then take your smartphone and then go door knock them, or you can put them in and make calls to them, if they have phone numbers. So that's how we kind of separate out our data, and then we can also track it, and then we can see, of the percentage, how many did we actually talk to, how many responded to us, and then after the election, when this voter data is updated, we can see how many of them actually voted.
Okay, so I understand that. So then Paige how do you get and keep your data?
So
Because I use PDI, so what do you use for campus?
our resource is actually, this is specific to the New Voters Project, which is like the student PIRG. CALPIRG is California PIRG. So it's specific to like the student PIRG group, which is like nationwide. It's called All In. So you can look at it by college campuses, and all of the ones that we work on are on there. I think a lot of them in general are on there. You can look at different reports for like 2022, 2024, 2020, 22, 24, and like backwards from there a little bit to like see how this data like squared up. So like I don't have access to a lot of data, so it goes to like the national team, and they filter it from there.
So students who register at UC Berkeley all end up on this list by CalPIRG or by the national PIRG?
Like their information, or just the fact that they registered?
Just your ability to contact them even. Do you have a phone number for the students?
I don't think we keep the phone numbers from them. We just use like the amount of people that we either like registered or like contacted.
So when you register somebody, you keep their data?
No, I don't think so. Like we don't.
So
keep
how
their
do you
phone-
reach back out to them?
This is a good question.
No, we had the same thing because we got a grant to do voter registration at the high school and community college level. And we did that. We registered 5,000 students, you know. Darn good effort by the guy that led it. But we had this question, do we copy their data off of their voter registration form? The answer to us was no. That's what we came up with. So we wouldn't have a way to go back to them and figure out, did they vote? Did they, you know?
Can I add something?
But that's
PDI is on my dream list of things to get access to. I don't know if our national office uses it, but it's the same situation where they're cutting data at the national level and
Right.
distributing it. We have used, and I'm sure there's more than one of these, but we've used the Rock the Vote like online widget for voting, for voter registration, where if I process the voter registration online, the registrant can opt into contact, right? And
Okay.
then what I can pull from Rock the Vote is, let's say I register 100 people, maybe 40, 50, 80 people opt into contact, I can pull that information. So I'm not copying it, they're opting in.
Yeah.
And it's like a really simple widget online. I'm sure there's others that exist like it. And more, as I think people are moving away from paper registration, one of the things we were doing pre-COVID that we still just, I think there's so much of this like relearning how to be in person, is we had acquired like 6 to 8 tablets. And so when we were going out to register people to vote, rather than the stacks of forms, we were taking the tablets. And so then it's like, oh, register to vote here, go to this. And then the other thing we're doing now, post-COVID, are we really post-COVID? But is, QR codes,
Yeah.
right? And so rather than giving giving someone a flyer, we print a banner that has a QR code on it. So if we're all pointing to the same website, or if, League is pointing all to the same site, you may be able to get people to opt in that way. But the question of whether or not to copy from the paper form is one that I think every organization struggles with.
Yeah.
But I think you can just do what you all did, which is just as each registered student at that high school, there could have been like a league postcard to be like, hey, would you like to get more information from the league? And then they could have opted in, joined as a
We'd
member.
have to add that component of the, yeah, okay.
Do you need the microphone?
Yeah.
So, I don't know if this
You have to put it really.
Wow, I don't think it's
Not on.
on. It says it's on, but it's really.
Hello.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you. So, a couple of things are going on in Cupertino, Sunnyvale. We are engaging with some high school interns, and so we are starting a paid internship program. And yeah, I know, right? So we're interviewing them this weekend, and one of the tasks that we want to do is to improve, how should we say this, the diversity of our league. And one of the things we thought about doing was asking the students to go through the voter data, because you can get it from your register of voters, but it's kind of raw.
Yeah.
And kind of seeing, what communities are most engaged in voting and which ones may need a little bit of assistance. So, the idea being that you can get, start recruiting. And so we're going to be doing tabling. And so I was just wondering, do you know of any tips or tricks on tabling in terms of helping to build those coalitions, or jointly tabling, which seems a little bit dicey from a league's point of view, maybe? Because there's in terms of maintaining, shall we say, nonpartisanship, a lot of the organizations around tend to be progressive that are active in the South Bay. So partnering or tabling with those organizations might be fraught, but like say for instance, we wanted to invite some groups to table at the, say, Sunnyvale Art and Wine Festival, which is June 5th, come on out, June 3rd and 4th, come on out. How would we do that? I mean, any tips or tricks or considerations?
I'm happy to start on about it. We table every week, so like tabling is just like second nature to us. Almost to the point where like sometimes next week we're taking a break from tabling. We've done it nonstop every Friday all year. So I don't think you have to table with other organizations necessarily. I think there's lots of different opportunities to partner, but tabling is a low enough lift that you could do it as a single organization. I'd say a few things. Art and Wine Festival, Farmers Market, right? There's so many at the mall, the grocery store, Girl Scout cookies, right? Like the way they do it, just always out there. So a few things come to mind for me is we very like granular, but like we pack all of our stuff in a little suitcase, right? So we never want to get somewhere and not have everything because then it's just too much of a pain. We make sure that we've got a couple of people. We always bring sign-up sheets because you don't, what's the point of an interaction if I couldn't document it and I couldn't collect that information? There is a little bit of personality, I think, that is required with tabling or caffeine, whatever that is. Like, have you ever seen a table where the person's like this the whole time? And it's like, I don't want to go up to you and engage you. And so I have a colleague who she'd always joke about how she had to have her like grande Starbucks before she went out tabling because she knew she was a different person before and after. And so just, like be aware of that part of it. And then the last thing I would say is be prepared with like some talking points and some FAQs. And it may take a little bit of tabling to get there. Like what's a question I get often? How do I answer that so that I can train the intern to do it? I think those are the big things. And then honestly, like things like candy and giveaways, like just make it fun to stop by. Yeah. That's what I love.
In line with the get your coffee first, like don't just expect people to come to your table. Right. Have somebody who's willing to say, hey, we want some candy,
we have a
or whatever.
Yes, those are
like I think we do like trivia about the city that we're tabling in.
That's good.
Oh, that's fun.
And then there's prizes.
I have one more thing to add really fast to that. One more tip for tabling. We do a lot of tabling on the campus in our big like quad area. Don't have everybody behind the table. Have people that go out that are waving at people, like catching their attention. It's awkward the first time you do it, but you get the hang of it. It's kind of fun.
It's restricted in our.
Oh no! But even so, like the balance of that then, right, is like everybody sitting at the table versus sitting, standing, kind of on the sides. Like that kind of thing makes a difference, right? So if you can't walk around and like be very like boisterous, you can still do it from the table.
Channel your inner cheerleader.
I guess the point is, I hadn't really thought about this because we're thinking about individuals, but we will see a lot of other groups, who are also tabling.
Mm-hmm.
Get
So
their
there's also
contact
that
information.
Make friends, right? Like that.
Hi, I'm Pat from Marin County, and I just wanted to, I wonder if people are aware that the California Student Voter Registration Act, so the colleges there is a person on site at each of the colleges, mostly community colleges and the UCs, that is actually supposed to distribute information to every student. It's actually was created, I don't even know when this was, but they have in Sacramento, so they have a group called what is it called here? student voter program. And so they actually have quarterly meetings where they, report in what's going on. And but the contact at the school. So we tried to contact that person. We already had a program going there, and she kind of just said, "Oh yeah, we're doing it," but we were doing it. So developing, there's money from the state if you, not to pay the person, but if you have an event and you buy food or something, you can get reimbursed. That's the idea anyway. I just haven't done it in practice. So I just thought I would, let everybody know about that.
So that person would be like the VIPs that Paige was talking about, right?
It depends, activities, I think it's different at each school. But they do have a list at the Secretary of State of who the contact is supposed to be. And they usually just have like a general email. So we actually found the person and forwarded the name of the person to them so that we actually, so we're trying to begin to develop that relationship as well.
What's the name of that program again?
It's the California Student Voter Registration Act. So the Secretary of State must provide every high school, community college, and CSU and UC campus voter registration forms. And they also have a specific, so if the university or the college when someone is registering at a community college, they're supposed to be able to register to vote at the same time. And each community college has a different code, so they're keeping track of who registers at the college. I'm not sure how the follow-up is, but those numbers they are tracking.
And that's just California voters, because I know it's
California.
College campuses can be complicated because people are not necessarily in state.
Yeah, there's rules, and educating the students about that is also important. But anyway, it's a resource.
But it's also important to know that it also applies to high schools. The ed code and the elections code the election code requires every high school district to have a contact person for voter education and to do voter education in the schools. And most schools don't know it. So if I don't know if you know what the Civic Center is, the Civic Center is a nonprofit based in LA. So what they started doing is brilliant, is they started doing public information requests to various school districts and asking them who their contact person was. And they would all get all upset and call them and say, well, we don't have anybody. And they say, well, we can help. So it's really a good tactic. So contact all your school districts. They're required by the elections code. And the last 2 weeks in September and the last 2 weeks in April are high school voter education weeks.
Say that again, last 2 weeks of
September and the last 2 weeks in April.
Okay.
By code.
By code.
Yeah.
Although
Yep.
it's a little tricky because that's set up for April code for a June primary. We no longer have
I know,
that.
it is.
Yeah.
You actually need to.
It's after the primary.
Yes, need to
Right.
adjust it. And it said you need to adjust it partly because it's better because it's not close to finals and AP, all those
Right,
kinds
right,
of things earlier year than you hit the March.
Right. But you can work with your school district.
Yes.
And, yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to share that when we go to festivals and downtown LA has a dance thing in the summertime, and League of Women Voters tried to set up a table there. We did, and we danced. Most people didn't want to stop and talk to us because they wanted to dance, right? So, plus, we've also done events where we set up at like a farmer's market. People come by and say, we're already registered, right? So you don't really get very many people. I would like to ask you to consider finding out where there are job fairs or people who are looking for jobs. And what happens at a job fair is that there are tables with people who want to give jobs out or take job applications or whatever. So we did get a few registrations that way, but the best thing was I walked around to each of those tables to talk to the people who are giving out jobs, and I said to them, can you put this up in your office so that when people come to your office, they can see how they can vote, how they can register. There was a QR code. So be creative and don't go to places that already have people that already vote.
One other quick follow-up to that people don't want to stop and fill out something or even scan a QR code. If you print little business cards that have the QR code on it, have your website on it or whatever, people will often just take that. Who knows how, you know, whether they'll actually do anything with it, but at least it has the potential to have them follow up with it.
I just want to say because in the area in Oakland where we did the farmers market, a lot of people were already registered to vote. So when getting up from the table, what I was doing was having voter's edge information, which I know we're not really sure where that's going, but that was really key. People were very interested in that. And so I always liked the bookmarks. I know we have the scan code as well that you can hand out, but the bookmark is just, and we have it in Spanish as well. It's like putting something in someone's hand, and people were always interested in that information. If you were already registered, then you need to know, like, where do I get the information? And Voter's Edge is like a way into that. So remember that.
Yeah. Sorry, Pat again. So we just started participating in Clean Slate. Are you aware of the Clean Slate programs? And we met with the public defender and the probation department, and they are now providing registration to formerly incarcerated people in the system as they're working through the system. So we're developing, actually there's a lot of great materials that was already prepared by the ACLU, which we unfortunately discovered a little too late. But that's actually another opportunity to gather, because those Clean Slate events have so many other organizations that are participating, and again, like you walk around and you introduce and find opportunities for education. So I recommend that too. I don't know if every county has one, but they are around.
But Pat, you said PDM.
Probation. And it was the chief probation.
Yeah.
The public defender. Yeah.
One of the things we're thinking of doing is enrichment programs at middle schools. So does anybody know of any middle school or even elementary school materials for educating younger children about voting and what it is and why you would care about it?
The Alameda County, you might have something, the Alameda County, I forget what it is, like the Office of Education has a whole program that starts from like elementary through middle school, and they partner with the Secretary of State. I can try to, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can try to find it. It's a county program, but I think it's state materials.
We wanted to, I know that a lot of the high school students I've worked with want to reach out to middle school students or even younger. And so we were thinking of starting some sort of enrichment opportunities through, students teaching students. So
I used to teach 8th grade, and I would use the League's Easy Voter Guide with my 8th graders.
Yep.
And it was terrific. And I even had parents come to me and appreciating what their kids were learning and that they learned from them too. So you can even use the Easy Voter Guides with 8th graders.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
The other thing I'll recommend on the youth engagement stuff, if your league isn't already doing a mock election in your high school, the Secretary of State has a mock election program. They give you basically everything you need for it. You just have to have a contact at the school who is willing to kind of send out, it's a Google form, send out the information to the students. So they give you access to the students. If you have contacts with students in the high school, they can help you with publicity and stuff. But it's a program that's completely set up by the Secretary of State.
I had a question about safety with volunteers. I was wondering if any of your organizations have safety measures, training for your volunteers, so that when they do go out in the field, they feel safe and have something to work with.
I'll just start real quick. We do a lot of training for volunteers who go out and go door knocking. It really depends also on the comfort of the volunteer. So for some volunteers, if they're experienced, they've done it, it might just be as simple as like, here's my number, call me if anything happens. We always train volunteers to trust their gut, don't enter anyone's home. If something doesn't feel right, it's okay, you should just leave. And we also make sure that generally we send people out in partners. And we generally like if people are comfortable, we ask them to split up eventually, but they can always start door knocking together until they get the hang of it. And then they can either leapfrog and, you know, kind of stay side by side, but pick different houses, or one of them can do the even side of the street, one can do the odd side of the street, but, you know, keep an eye on each other, know generally where each other are, and just kind of be in touch with your buddy in the field. So those are some really basic things. And then at times when, you know, sometimes you just meet people who are not, don't want to be, their door does not, they don't want their door to be knocked, they're very upset, and we just really train people in a little bit of de-escalation of like, sorry, no problem. You know, some very common, just, you know, if you look it up online, some de-escalation techniques to say, I don't want to escalate this conflict, we're not trying to prove a point, we're not trying to argue with anybody. You don't want to talk to us, that's okay, right? And we just say, thanks, have a good day, and leave. And then, you know, I think, again, it's like checking on volunteers, making sure someone is, you know, debriefing with them afterwards, seeing if they had any concerns or questions come up so that they feel like, okay, if I do have an issue, I know who I can go to and I can debrief it and talk about it. And then we really just try to get people to focus on, like, there's a lot of fears about door knocking because people are just, you know, it's not something that the average person maybe has experience with. And so we also just want people to focus on the positive, because sometimes you can be so afraid of like, oh, I'm gonna get a mean person who's gonna slam the door in my face or yell at me. But the reality is we have so many volunteers who are like, oh yeah, like yes, I did meet one guy who's a jerk or slammed the door in my face or yelled at me, but then I met like 2 or 3 other people who were like, thank you so much for volunteering your time, right? And just really helping people remember those are the people we're trying to reach.
So 2 things. One, backtracking just a little bit to the question about people are already registered when we go places. I was thinking, like, who makes the best basketball shoe? Nike. I agree or disagree, but it's just what they're known for, right? And like, who are the little kids that sell us cookies?
Girl Scouts.
Brand recognition, right? And so if you go somewhere and people are already registered to vote, I would suggest that it's still great that you went. Because what you're doing through the visibility is reminding them of the incredible organization that is the League of Women Voters, but also that an election is coming up. And as much legislation has been passed to make voting easier, I do find people who are like, that's gotten a lot more complicated. Like, where do I go? When does it start? Where's my ballot? And so your ability to educate voters, I think, is level 2 above even just registering people. So thank you for going out to places where sometimes it's like, why did I come? I only got 1 registration. But that visibility mattered. You are the Nike of voting. The question about safety. So just to add to the points, so we always send people out in pairs. We try to pair newer or less experienced people with more experienced people. For us, with a staffing model, that means a lot of times that there's a manager out there, right? And even with newer people, there's a different like disposition some people will have. Like you can tell that they're going to be okay holding their own, and you can tell who's going to be a little bit nervous. And we ask people like, what's your comfort level? So we send them out in groups. And then for any of you who might be interested, we also host bystander intervention trainings and microaggression interruption trainings. And so if you ever want to bring that content to your league, feel free to contact us. I do think that it helps to know how to de-escalate, and one of the things that we'll do through those trainings is ask people to practice. So the lawyer side of me, whenever I train people on how to interact with law enforcement, I make them say the words out loud. My lawyer will call you, because if you've never said it before, you're definitely not saying it when an FBI agent is at your door. Same thing, if you've never interrupted a hate incident or a microaggression, doing it for the first time can be a bit nerve-wracking, and so we want to practice that way.
I think another important, thank you. All those amazing points, remember all that. Also remember to build kind of the community like within your chapter too. That was super helpful for us this year. Is just make sure that people like feel like you can be a resource for them too if they have some incident, even with a buddy or anything. Like make sure they feel like they can come to you with any concerns or worries that they have. So just be super friendly and kind of try to build a community of happiness and taking care of people.
It's 291 days till the.
Oh my gosh.
We have a counter on our league site, by the way. So that's a good tabling opportunity, you know, like a counter countdown.
And I have a question for Paige. So it sounds like you do an amazing job in getting folks registered and all of that. So do you also provide then voter information to them to make those decisions then when it's time to vote?
I think it's the biggest thing I've learned from working with League in the past couple weeks is having some short little pamphlets about like information of like what ballot is this, or like what is the candidate's like stances on different issues, or just like what have they said or what is the ballot. So I think that's an important thing that's one of my biggest takeaways from this is to have little things made up of that. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Was that
Have you thought about partnering with the League and getting that information?
Absolutely.
That's the voter's edge piece.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Right, thank you.
I was just going to make a comment. And so, you know, I've spent almost my entire career as a union advocate and I've worked tons of elections. And I'm just getting the sense that people are kind of sick of the election business. My mailbox is full of, you know, literature at election time. I am throwing out pieces of mail all the time. And the one-on-one conversations that we can have with people in a casual environment, it doesn't have to be formal, at a farmer's market or some other place that is safe for someone to ask you questions. And a nice approach, I think, is what gets people on our side, particularly around issues that impact them, whatever's on the ballot or a particular candidate they may have a question about. So, you know, the whole business of elections, I think it's become a huge industry for both parties. And we have to find a way to get to voters with their hearts, right? And their own self-interest. So just an observation.
I agree. I think that was Zahra that said something about that earlier, but yeah, that's a really good point. Just like speak to them and make sure they know that's impacting them.
So we ran, in 2016, we ran a charter campaign to change the city charter for the city of San Bernardino. And our door-to-door experience, it took like 15 to 20 minutes per contact because nobody knew what the hell a city charter was. They didn't realize that their city had a city charter. They didn't know what it said, and they didn't know what we were changing it to. And so it was massive education, but you know, it won. And you know, it's because we devoted all the time to talk to the people. Yeah. A lot of them think this, like, wow, I never knew that.
Hi, yeah, I'm a college student. I'm here representing the Mount Baldy area chapter of the League of Women Voters.
Good.
Yeah, right near you.
You're next door.
But I attend the Claremont colleges, and so we have a club for the LWV. I just want to say that I think when it comes to engaging college students who are voting or could vote, it's really important to have face-to-face, in-person interaction. We're not going to answer our phones. We're not going to respond to your texts. I won't, even though I care about this deeply. So I think that it's important to get involved when it comes to like club fairs and job fairs. Someone said job fairs around here, and any kind of relationship you can build with a college or community or a club. That's going to elicit the best outcome. Yeah.
Yep. I don't know on that one. I don't know if you've done this before, or I don't know how this works if you're not actually a college student, but tabling at events that are like part of like really big campus things already. I don't know if you've done that, but we have something called like CALPTopia at UC Berkeley, which is a really big thing. A lot of like job fair people will be there, a lot of clubs will table. So being there is super important.
What was it called?
It's called CALPTopia at Berkeley.
Right, every different school has that, like a club fair, some kind of event where people are there to talk to other people, to get to know people and get involved in clubs and things. And that's a good way to not only get people to register to vote or remind people that they need to register to vote, but also if you're trying to form a club or a like student affiliated chapter with your league chapter, that's a good way to meet people who might be interested in getting involved with the LWV.
But now let me question you. You want to see people your age?
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to see me. No, but I'm just saying, like, we did the voter registration drive, but the guy who did it was like 28. Yeah. So he
close enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So high school kids.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, well, he's about 6'5" and hungry, but you work with what you have.
Okay. We have about 5 minutes, so 1 or 2 more questions.
Well, in honor of our union organizer, this was reported in the San Francisco Chronicle quite a long time ago. The aunt of Stephen Breyer was a union organizer. She was going into the hospital and they asked if she wanted to sign a do not resuscitate document, and she said, not until after the next election.
Deborah Barger from the Butte County League, and Butte County makes San Bernardino look real progressive. Some days it's a little more tearful. But I was going to say, yes, we've reached out to Cal State Chico and our local community college, and in addition to any of the activities that said the welcome back, freshman orientation, and we actually did voter registration to some student groups that partnered with us. So they were the face forward. We didn't have loopy guys though, but enthusiastic students, and they ended up, and the number one question, and this is what was used successfully at any of the tabling events, is not are you registered to vote, or do you need to update your voter registration?
Yes.
Which for students, that was the freshmen had no idea that of course their address changed.
Yes.
To say you need to update your address. And then what we had at the table with the old folks working it in the back was actually the addresses for a number of the dorms, the residence halls, or even the private dorms, or anything else. You say, what the zip code was, so that they knew and they could take a picture of it to say wherever they lived, we could provide that information. And the one key thing that we got from it is they were so enthusiastic about doing photo ops that they actually built a couple of things. This is one thing I always wanted, is have the little face showing in a suffragist costume. Now we need one for Drag for Democracy. but we have those now at our office storage to be able to use for more photo ops for other engagements. So we don't do a roulette, but to sort of help people stop and engage in those things. They can take a picture. What we don't have ballots in anything else besides English, because there are not enough people speaking other languages. But we clearly have a small mosque. We have small. I don't know that we could even identify ethnic media in rural Northern California. But it's sort of, do you have suggestions for when these such small communities about how we can connect to say, do you have some translations to somebody that we could say, yeah, put out there? And then the challenge is, no, we don't have someone that speaks Hmong, but.
Yeah, I think this is just back to everyone's point that, I don't think anyone expects, nor does it make sense for the league to be translating or trying to do that themselves, but partnering with local organizations that might do services, even if it's a local religious institution, or what are the centers of those communities for the Hmong community or the Muslim community in that tiny town. They're definitely connected to each other somehow. Yes. And so who are those people, or who are those institutions that already play that kind of, they're providing that service, and say, hey, we want your people to vote too. Can we support somehow in doing that, and how can we partner and have that conversation and build a relationship, I would say.
Something we've done in some of the communities in the Bay Area with the league has been to bring the voter education events to the places where the people are, which is our organizing model to begin with. But so, for example, could you host, a ballot party or a ballot dinner at like a Hmong cultural center at the local mosque? You may even from that experience recruit a key volunteer for each of those communities into the league, who could then help facilitate even deeper relationships.
We're out of time.
Could I just make a comment?
Quick comment.
I often translate messages into Spanish because we have a significant Hispanic population in our community. And you can use Google, and it's very easy to translate and
into languages, and I just print one side in English and one side in Spanish.
Yep, it helps if you have a
Correct.
native speaker.
Yeah.
You can start with that maybe, and then give it to somebody who's a native speaker.
Good suggestion.
Just very, very, very quickly, you may all know this already, in which case I apologize for the redundancy. But I just had occasion to look up the state's online registration form, and it comes in already 12 or 14 languages. And so, you know.
It's more the extra information, like the voter's edge type information.
Right.
All right, thank you all so much. Thank you.